Welcome back to episode 7 of the Soul Talk podcast series. Today, we are going to be talking about the frequency of clarity. This is a topic that Jenna was bringing forward, so I'm going to hand it over to her right away so she can start chatting about the frequency of clarity.
Yeah, I brought this up because I've really been feeling it more and more in my field as like an invitation to opening, and it just feels like such an exhale when we allow it to arrive. Something that I said recently about clarity was, and I think I said it to you, Laura, I don't remember, but um it was that it often, when we seek it, when we're seeking it out, it's often something that's already arrived for us. And that seeking ends up being like a looking for external validation of an internal truth. And it often does feel like an opening once we, I don't know, quote unquote, accept the clarity that we've received and we lean into that intuitive knowing of our truth. But it also can be activating because it's an uncomfortable switch, because sometimes clarity is an invitation to push you into a bigger version of you, into a higher frequency. So I don't know, what does clarity feel like to you guys?
I feel like this is, for me, I'm feeling this concept of honesty,
Mm.
like radical self-honesty. And so I think that the more that we know ourselves, the more that we're present with ourselves, the more that we are open to, I like this concept of opening, right? The more that we're open to receiving all of ourselves, the more that we are able to um, kind of express or know what it is we are not expressing. Like, what is it that I'm not saying? What is it that I'm not seeing? Right. And if we can be curious to that, because then we're going to have even more clarity on who we are. And if we have clarity in who we are, what we stand for, what we stand on, where our soul is guiding us, how we are in communion with our soul as we open to its guidance, then I feel like clarity is something that is faster, right? It's faster and it's something that we shy away from less because I think that we can have this, like you said, it can be activating. And I think that we can have this like almost hyper vigilant relationship with clarity because it's like, well, once I have that clarity though, then I know it. And then once I know that, what does that mean? Does that make me a bad person? Does that mean that I'm an asshole? Does that mean that I'm callous, that I'm being judgmental of myself and others? And so we get into this narrative around the clarity where really it's like, how that's why I'm talking about radical honesty. Like, how much can I fully receive this clear truth and actually, like you said, Jenna, accept it? Like, come into acceptance, not only acceptance, but appreciation, and like come into being madly in love with what my truth is in that moment. And I think that the more that I can express that clarity, the more clarity then arrives on top of that clarity and it continues to get refined.
Mm. Yeah, something that was coming up for me on clarity is that it can sometimes feel elusive, but it is only elusive when we are one, not in self-acceptance, or two, we are trying to in some way be in that more of the pleasing energy. We're holding ourselves to a paradigm in a box that we think we need to be in, and that can make clarity feel elusive, mainly because we're just not being honest with ourselves, like you brought in, Laura. Um, but I think that clarity is always present. It is not something that we need to seek. It is always there. It is just a matter of attuning to our truth and, like Jenna said, accepting the truth of what is in our field now and being willing to move away from the paradigms that have been our constant to that date. So being able to be in more of a radical integrity, because honesty is one piece of it, but being in integrity means that I allow myself to flow with my clarity. rather than being bound by the precepts that I have been doing up until this date, because we're always changing. And therefore, our clarity, it looks like our clarity is increasing, but it is really more of an acceptance of that clarity.
So how do you come into that knowing? Like you talked about attuning to your truth, right? And allowing yourself to kind of flow with your clarity. Um, because you're honoring your integrity as well. So this is really what this is about, is this is an embodiment discussion, right? Like how do I bring in, the embodiment of, what my soul's truth is and the values that I hold within this lifetime, which are interrelated, right? They're not mutually exclusive. But how do you then receive or feel into this clarity that is already there? Like for somebody who's out there who's like, okay, you say clarity is always here. How do I access that? Like, how do I tangibly attune to that and have that discernment that like I know this is clarity? Like, how do you know that?
So for me personally, what I have found in my journey with clarity and my relationship with clarity has been first stillness, and that I'm not meaning stillness in motion. I'm meaning stillness in the mind and stillness within my body. I can be outside doing a meditative walk, I can be doing any sort of activity with contemplation and in full communion with myself. When I touch the inner aspects of myself, and this is something that you can do through like mirror work where you can't not see yourself, right? Or journaling where things are coming out, whether you like them coming out or not. When you're in this place of centeredness, the clarity is clear. This is when you're touching what is already existing within you. And once you touch what is already in existence within you, that's where we want to put the label of this is my clarity now, this is my truth now. But because it already exists, we can put any label on it, whether you want to call it your integrity, your values, your truth, you know, any of those things. This is why it's in existence. And all we have to do is come into stillness with the self, come into centeredness with the self, and kind of close off the blinds, close, the blinds of our houses and be really in presence.
It's like the aha moment energy. That's what it feels like to me. Because it's like if I sit, because you can say be in stillness even if you're moving, right? And that's scary as hell to a lot of people because their mind's running a million miles a minute, or they've been at a clip or a pace that's just dizzying. And it's being able to devote to that space and choose and know and trust that it's going to settle, right? It's going to settle because we all know that feeling of like we're sitting there chilling or we're walking around and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I just had this clarity or this aha moment on something that I first of all didn't even realize that I wanted clarity on or may have been thinking about for a while. And it's like, oh, we know that feeling of that opening that Jenna talked about at the beginning, that opening and that like exhale that she talked about of like, ah, I see, I feel, right? Like that's the feeling we're talking about when we're talking about clarity arriving, whether you're in stillness. And a lot of times people can find this like while they're driving or in the shower. People say that all the time. It's like, well, Laura, I can't get message from the Akashic records when I'm in the Akash, but then when I'm in the shower, it always drops in. It's like, well, yeah, because you're not trying, you're not seeking, like Jenna was saying. You're just kind of like, you're in still, like, where are you gonna go? You're in a shower. Where are you gonna go? You're naked, right? Like, and so you're there, you're with yourself, and stuff drops in. And sometimes that's with driving because it can help the brain while you're in motion to feel like, okay, I'm doing something, I'm in motion, but I'm focused enough and I have enough space that something's going to drop in, right? So Jenna, what are your thoughts on this?
I like the bringing in of driving because that's me. It always drops in when I'm driving. But yeah, I think that I agree with the concept of the opening. And then it's funny because like I said, clarity when it arrives can sometimes be activating and you think, no, that's not clear because it's making me feel, itchy or like a nervous system. And it's like, no, I need more clarity then because what just came in and dropped in
Mm.
makes me feel like crazy. And it's like, no, because the discernment there is what's beyond it, right? Like but there's an opening beyond it. There's a freedom beyond it. Oh, okay, beyond the initial activation of it, right? And I think a lot of the time clarity can come in different aspects of desire. You ask yourself what you want. Don't make it a mind game where you just start reeling, but like ask yourself what you want. Ask spirit to show you or to open you to the recognition and the acceptance of what you want and what you need. To not make it a human thing where you're like, oh, I need XYZ to feel good, to feel safe, to feel whatever. It's like, no, open me to, my soul's whatever it may be.
I like that a lot because it brings in that question of why do you want clarity?
Hmm.
Right? Like, why do you want clarity? You want clarity so that you can control the situation. Do you want clarity so that you can stop worrying? Or, like what is the purpose of seeking clarity rather than just trusting that, well, I claim that I'm a clear person, that I have clarity. I know I have clarity at all times. I might have clarity on what I'm having for lunch, and I might have clarity on where I'm going with my soul's path for the next 60 years, right? Like it could be either way, I have clarity. And whatever clarity is meant to arrive in my field is going to depend on, like Nino said, that self-acceptance, that openness, right? That ability to receive, but also being able to claim, like, I'm choosing that I am somebody who has clarity. I am trusting that clarity arrives, and therefore I don't have to go seek it. Because if I have to go seek it, or if I'm looking for it, or if I'm like, okay, what clarity is going to arrive to me today? What is the purpose of that? Why am I looking for that? Why am I grabbing for that? Rather than just choosing and saying, like, I'm a clear person, right? I'm a clear person and I'm an open person. So it's going to come in. And when it comes in, I trust myself to follow it. I trust myself to follow it.
Yeah, and more often than not, when you're doing that grabbing and that seeking, you already have the answer and you already know it. You just don't like it, or you're afraid of what it is. So like when you're in that space of grabbing and being like, no, I'm seeking clarity, I'm seeking something. It's like, okay, stop for a second because you know.
And I think that's
Yeah,
where,
and I think,
go ahead, Nino.
God, I think that's where I was gonna chime in as far as the activation that you were talking about, Jenna, because just because we have clarity doesn't mean that we are necessarily going to like the answer, and that is why clarity can seem elusive, but it also is challenging. It will challenge what we think is true, and it not so much what we think is true, but the aspects of us that still want to hold on to some type of societal conditioning or something that we learned, something that has been true for us for many years. And that challenge is why clarity is also an invitation, because it is asking us, you know this truth, you know this value, and in order to live in integrity, you have to make a change. You have to move with it. And that's why a lot of people will continue to seek more clarity, continue to reach for the answer that they want to hear so that they don't have to change.
Yeah, I love that, challenging what we think is true, because we can have such an avoidant relationship with clarity, where it's like, yeah, I'm going to create all the excuses in the book, because once that actually drops in, it's kind of like, oh shit, like, really? That's my truth. And we can shove it away. Or we can say, well, that's not practical. This is when practicality comes in. Well, that's not practical. That doesn't make sense because of where I am in my life right now, because of what's, going on. And that's where we come back to desire. Like Jenna was saying, right? Where we come back to desire. It's like, well, what do I desire right now? And that's a big clarifying factor for me in refining my clarity, is like, well, what do I desire right now? Because I get to claim my desire right now, right? In this moment, and what I desire. And once I claim that, my desire may shift, because I've now chosen to be demonstrative about something. And I've chosen to say, yes, I do have clarity on this, and I'm choosing to follow my clarity. And again, like I said, that becomes this compounding, like then you have more clarity and more clarity. But I do think that this is one of those areas that we can feel like we are really rebellious. Oh my gosh, I had this aha moment and it just dropped in and it scares me and it challenges what we think is true. And I have to make a change, like you said, like I gotta move with it. And then what are the consequences of that? Like, what does that mean? And we can judge ourselves, or we can feel like this is really outlandish. And to me, when that happens and it's really exciting, that shows that that's your soul's path, right? Like that's real clarity right there, because you're not going to bring in an aha moment that's life changing, that's going to feel like it's just followed the comfortable path you've always followed, right? It's not, it that might feel like, oh, this is nice, but it's not going to be like a woo clarity punch.
Yeah, that feels good. And I think in those moments, you can also, like I was saying earlier, get into looking for something to prove you right. Like something, some big event or something to have a sign. And you start looking for that. And it's like, why are we waiting for like the universe to hit us over the head with something that we already know exists? Like, why are we waiting and I know that we got into the concept of time, but like earlier in our series, but like, why are we waiting for something to smack us over the head with a truth that we already have?
Dude, you brought up signs. Don't even get me freaking started.
I
I
know.
think this is one of the reasons why this is one of the things that people do for clarity. And it's like, well,
Mm.
I'm going to pull 16,000 cards and then I'm going to use my pendulum. And then I'm going to look to see if like a cardinal lands on my left ass cheek on Tuesday at 3:33. And if
Oh, I'm
that
gonna ask for that.
happens, then I have clarity, right? I mean, it's just like all of these signs that you look for clarity. And listen, like that shit's fun, right? Like it's fun. Like let's play with it, absolutely. But recognize that that's just a satisfaction for your human. That's like bringing your nervous system. It's like giving your nervous system a little more space to acclimate to the truth that you've already decided and known and recognized is there. So it's like, okay, do that for yourself. But you can also recognize it's a little bit of kicking the can down the road. And sometimes we do need to kick the can down the road for a little bit to honor our human, right? But it's very similar to like I pulled cards before we started this episode today. And I was saying, I don't pull cards as much with the conscious content anymore, as much as I'm just connecting to the energy that arrives through that. I'm not looking for validation. I'm not looking for a narrative that's coming through those cards to validate where I am or where I'm going, to answer my question, to make sure that I didn't fuck something up, right? I actually am pulling those cards because I desire an energetic opening that I may not see or feel or have conscious access to in that moment, because I'm devoted to an opening clarity within my field in whatever form it arrives, not a validation that what I've recognized as my clarity is correct. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah, and I
that feels
think
good.
yes, and I believe that we're talking a little bit about the need for validation, the human need for validation. And there's nothing wrong with needing some validation, but we cannot use validation as a crutch, right? And this is where being an acceptance of the energy that we are feeling, whatever whatever sensation that is your strongest, instead of asking for signs all the time to prove your clarity, take the clarity. And if you're questioning it, if you're feeling the nervous system still needing to integrate it, that's when you can go back within yourself, because your validation always comes from within. Your validation is never without first. Like the external is going to, it follows your clarity, it doesn't bring your clarity. And so when you get into those touch points with yourself and allow yourself to witness the external not as proof of, I'm doing this right, but as a mirror of this is making me feel this way. That right there, that feeling that you're feeling in response to something is part of your clarity. It is part of your journey with that clarity piece. And it is just the attunement for your body, your physical body, your mental body, into what your soul already knows, what your consciousness already knows. And we can argue that if you really sit down and just listen to your body, the answer's already there, and you're just struggling with it from a mental plane.
And that's where I bring in movement, like exercise or movement in nature, even if it's just a light walk or something like that. Because I think, when we want to go back within ourselves, when the nervous system is activated, some people get that clarity only in movement because it depends on your field, right? Like everybody's different. And every moment is different, right? There's sometimes when going within myself is just still meditation. Lately it's been more about movement, because depending on what it is we have clarity on, that can be something that is very much stored within your cells, that is very much stored within your tissues, that can come from your ancestry, whatever. And as you move the body, you are, especially with that intention of attunement, like you're talking about, Nino, right? Like you're creating an opening within your body, because as we move, we are hydrating the tissue, we're opening the joints, we're opening the energy, we're releasing what isn't ours, and we're giving ourselves space. And so, how do you create space to be in presence with yourself, right? And sometimes that is movement. And sometimes, like Nino said, stillness doesn't necessarily mean I'm sitting still, right? It can be that you're just in contemplation, you're in intentional presence with yourself. And so, I think that your integration process can be uniquely your own. And we encourage you to share that in the comments of this podcast as well, so that we can really allow other people to be witnessed and to witness themselves um, in what feels good for them, and trying things on for size if they haven't figured out that formula yet. Because sometimes it's movement first and then you sit. It can be a little bit of a string of things, but I think it is about that nurturing and mothering of the nervous system and recognizing that humanity, at the same time that we are very much knowing that the clarity is there. So is there any other thoughts that you guys have before we close this up? Jenna, anything else hanging in there?
Hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking about, creating, because clarity is energy, just like anything else. So it's just creating the space for it to arrive too, within that movement or the quote unquote stillness or anything like that. Yeah, just allowing it to flow into you and
And
stop
like
putting a hard stop on it with your own thoughts.
100%. And I think it's like Nina said, it's the feeling into it, right?
Hmm.
And so it's, what does clarity feel like for you? What are the textures of clarity? What does it feel like in your body? What is the energy of an aha moment, right? I think that's a huge thing. It's like,
Hmm.
what does that feel like mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually? Like, what does an aha moment feel like? Because just like we talk about any other frequency that we can call in, the frequency of abundance, the frequency of love, whatever it is, right? Like, we can call that into our field by remembering a time that we felt that way before, or just calling for that memory within the body, because your body holds these energetic memories of what does that feel like? And when we allow that to arrive, and we allow ourselves to be in presence with it, I think that's a great gateway into playing with and opening up this clarity energy. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and thank you guys for your wisdom and love. And we will see you on our next episode of Soul Talk. Bye for now.